Okay. So back to the question, which I have lost because I have way too many tabs open. Okay, question from Christina Hendrick. She says, practice challenges me because I'm not able to make my hand do what I want it to yet. I know it'll only come with practice, but what if I am practicing the wrong way to do something? Then I never get to the place I want to be. I don't want to practice hours with something without the hope of getting there. How do I know that I'm doing something in a way that practice will lead to improvement? Thank you, Christy. Okay, do you want to go first or do you want me to start with that one?
Well, I'll just say a little line if you like. It's kind of, if you ever watch Britain's Got Talent or the USA Got Talent, Simon Cowell says to the singers, you've learned bad habits. So I guess if you're learning from somebody that you respect or they've got artwork that you want to emulate, then you're probably on the right track then. Otherwise, yes, you could definitely be learning the wrong bad habits, which are going to be difficult to get out of in the future.
See, I'm a little bit opposite on that viewpoint because I
disagree with me on the first point.
I know, I'm going to argue with you. As a musician, this is one thing that I see. Like learning violin, that was a big thing. If we learn bad habits, it is so hard to unlearn, like seriously hard. I still have bad habits. Like I don't hold my wrist quite right on the neck of the violin, and it's not something I was ever able to correct. I was lazy when I learned as a kid, and it's just something that kind of stuck with me. Whereas with art, it's really easy to fix those things. So like when I have a student who comes to me and they were taught something wrong, I can easily say, no, do it this way instead. And they're able to correct it. As long as someone's able to point out, this is why that isn't working. I'm able to correct that easier than somebody who's playing an instrument wrong. So I do find music and art to be a bit different there with my students, where as long as you're practicing, even if you're learning bad habits and learning what not to do, then you're still learning what not to do. So I find everything, like all of my students, even when they do something terrible, again, they're learning what not to do. So
yeah, good point.
It's just different than I find with music, because with music, I can't undo those bad habits, where with art, I can fix it on somebody.
Yeah.
So let's see if I can avoid arguing with you again.
I can always mute you, perhaps.
Okay. Next, and I'm not saying that I'm right. This is just what I've experienced.
It's just our opinions.
So we have a question from Linda. I'm not even going to say your last name because I'm terrible at that. She says, I'm new at painting. I'm having trouble with getting the fine detail fur. I want nice, smooth, soft, sometimes fluffy look. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, and I'm continuing to make the same mistakes. I'm attaching a bunny I'm working on at the moment. I do graphite work, and I don't have that problem with pencil. Okay. I don't know if you guys, I think I can share my screen with you. Because, and this is, I believe, done in acrylic, which I think is where the problem's coming here. So where is the little screen capture guy? I know there's a button for this, screen share, and I want this screen. Okay, can you guys see that bunny?
Yep, I've got it, yeah.
Okay, so what's happening on this bunny is if you're working in acrylic, your paint is dry and your edges are very harsh. If you were working in oil on this, your edges would blend and you'd get a softer look. If you put in too much harsh detail with those little lines where your paint is dry like it does with acrylic, it's just really hard to soften that look up. One thing that you can do in this case where you've got the harsher lines like this, glaze over all of it. And with a glaze, you don't want to add white to it. Your glaze is going to be a translucent paint. If you're, again, going back to if you're working in acrylic, you're going to be, I use water to thin out my paints to glaze. And I'll have Jason go over how he would do this in oil. But for acrylic, if you glaze over that bunny's fur, it's going to push, it kind of brings together your harsher lines and your softer lines together so that it's not so wiry looking. It just softens it all up that way. And sometimes just getting in each individual hair isn't necessary to create a soft look. Sometimes it's better just, I say this all the time, think in terms of clumps. But yeah, glazing over the entire bunny with like a brownish tone, that will make him look a lot softer. How about you, Jason? For oil, how would you do this?
If we stay on the acrylic a little second, Lisa, I think because you know more about acrylic, can you actually get a retarding medium to help with that for your future paintings?
Yeah, you can, and they suck, in short.
All right.
I don't know a single acrylic artist whose work looks like I look at and go, oh my gosh, I want my work to look like that. I don't know any of them who use actual retardants. the slow drying medium, I don't like them at all. The best thing that you can do for acrylic is to use an airbrush and continuously mist water over it. Then you can keep it wet for hours, and that will also give you I'm glad you asked that because I didn't even think about that with the airbrush. But using an airbrush, not for spraying paint, but for spraying water, you can keep your paint wet for hours and hours without any negative results. Like the retardant, it goops up the paint. It just changes the consistency and makes it really not attractive.
Yeah, you can also use a fine little plastic mist spray as well, Lisa, I think, can't you, if you don't have an airbrush?
For acrylic, because what happens with the spray bottles is heavy water droplets hit the canvas, and then that pulls paint off, so you actually can cause a lot of problems. So the airbrush is the way to go there.
Yeah, and those problems with the acrylic is exactly why I don't paint with acrylic. It's so much easier, in my opinion, to paint fur, especially soft fur in oils or alkyd mediums, where you've got that open window of, with oils, hours and hours, with alkyds, probably 15 or 20 minutes before it starts tacking up. I then work on one section at a time, and to get the fluffiness or the softness of the fur, I almost always brush over it with a synthetic soft brush like this. I don't know if you can see it on screen now. And that, just brushing that really lightly over the top just gives a really soft appearance to it.
Yeah, and that can be done, that same brush, that would work. Well, I would use a softer mop brush, but that can be done with acrylic if you're keeping the paint wet by mixing it with water. And with that airbrush, you don't have to get the expensive full $500 setup. You can get a cheap little $30 hobby kit that's single action, and it's really only good for misting water, but it's good at misting water. So that's a really good option. Okay,
excellent.
So one last question on the email list, and then we'll get some of the questions that people sent you. Cindy?
We're still seeing the bunny at the moment. I don't know if you know.
Okay, let me fix that. It shouldn't be.
Okay, it's off now.
Whoops. Cancel. Is it? It's off?
Yeah, it's all gone now.
Okay. Cindy says, she has a question for both of us. Can you tell us, when did you have the strongest feeling that you took a huge step in your learning skills? What new skills or new techniques were the most useful to develop your art? I don't know. Okay. She apologizes for bad English. Cindy, your English is better than most of us here in America. So you did good. So the question is, what was the point where we had the strongest feeling that we took a huge step in our learning skills, and what new skill or technique was most useful to develop our art? I'll let you go first, Jason.
Yeah, it's a difficult question for sure. I think I improved dramatically when I switched from standard oils to alkyd oils. When I stopped playing around with acrylics as well, the medium just seemed to suit me straight off. And a lot of the problems I was finding with watercolor, which made me want to rush all the time, acrylics I found also made me want to rush all the time. So as soon as I started with the oils, that's when things started to work right. Up until that point, I was really struggling, especially with fur and things like that.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot harder to accomplish in acrylics. That's when students come to me and they say they want to start with acrylics, I'll always ask why, because everyone thinks oil is going to be harder. It is so much easier for me to teach someone oil than it is acrylic. But
yes, without a doubt, I agree.
What technique did you feel? Whoops, last part of that question. And then I lost it. I'm a genius. What new skill or technique was the most useful in developing your art?
Why don't you go first on this one for a change?
Okay.
Difficult question.
I was trying to be polite and let you go first.
Go on, jump in.
Let's see. Let's actually read that at the time. I got a message from Ded. Let's make sure. No, we did not figure out the Q&A feature, Ded. We've got so many questions to answer right now. I don't know how. You know what? Go ahead and type to me how to do that, and I will fix that after I answer this question next time when Jason's answering one. How's that? Okay, back to Ded is sending me questions or messaging me through Facebook. So since I apparently don't know how to use Google Plus very well, I'm gonna have to learn this. But back to the question. Okay, the biggest step for me in learning skills, I kind of had two major points. The first was with Jaime Jimenez. He did a quick he came for our lunch break. He worked in the same building I did when I was working at an animal hospital. And he did a demonstration for me showing me how to do wet into wet painting with acrylic paint, which, as we were just talking about, it's difficult. It is not easy to get things to blend right with acrylic. He gave me my first little airbrush setup, which I still have around here somewhere, and showed me exactly how to do that. And from that point on, the painting that I had done previously, I only did marine work at this time. The painting that I did before it and the painting after, you wouldn't even know it was the same artist. It was just such a huge jump in learning wet into wet. The second point came about 7 years ago when I had been doing graphite pet portraits, and they were loose and messy, and yeah, you could tell it was an Italian Greyhound, but there wasn't a lot of detail. And I was looking one day at another artist's work, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I want my work to look like this. What is different about her work from my work? Sat there and I pinpointed the differences and figured out where I needed to work. And really, it was the amount of time I was spending. I was spending 45 minutes on a drawing. When I upped that to 8 hours, wow, did that make a difference. I went from fuzzy, blurry drawings to photorealistic graphite pieces. So that made the biggest difference for me.
Well, for me, it's interesting. People are going to laugh at this, but I never really had the confidence to start oil painting until I started watching Bob Ross on TV. Now, I don't particularly like his painting style now, but he gave me the confidence to actually buy oils and think I could possibly do it. And when I started with that, it did seem achievable. So that barrier was down. From then on, I wanted to do wildlife. He doesn't do any wildlife really. So then I bought every book I could find on serious wildlife art. Everyone that showed images, I tried to deconstruct how they painted it. I bought all the videos and I just read and saw every single thing I could. And that helped a lot. But there was still massive amounts of information missing on there as well. So that's when I started trying to teach myself it too. So that's really when I started.
Very cool. I'm reading through the comments. God, I am so glad you are here, Mr. Jester. What is you? I know your name, and I can't think of it off the top of my head. But he's fixing and answering everyone's questions for us. Oh my gosh, I'm glad you're doing that right now. You are so helpful. He actually has to help me all the time with Google Plus because I always upload stuff wrong on our own art group. I'm terrible. Okay. So there were my email list. Do you have a few questions from your fans you want to bring up?
Yeah, I got loads. This is an easy one for the both of us. It's a question from Cynthia, and it's basically, what's your preferred surface to paint on? And why? So do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go on.
My preferred surface would be MDF. Now, I don't know what you call that in the States. Is that hardboard or something like that?
Yeah, no, we MDF, we know what that is.
Right,
well,
it's the MDF and it's hard on both sides. It's not the one that's got the rough surface on the other side. So it's perfectly smooth. I like to gesso that myself. And just because the surface is so smooth, I find it much easier to paint on. The problem is, because most of my paintings ship to the US and things like that, because of the weight of it and because of the size, it's virtually impossible to send anything other than something small. So my second best choice, which is what I always use, is a portrait canvas, Frederick's portrait, and I can paint on that. It's nice and smooth. It's not as smooth, but I can roll it up then and ship it out.
Are you using the blue label or they're oil primed?
Oh, I don't know. To be honest, it's called Frederick's 574, so it's already primed, acrylic primed, and that's a portrait canvas. And it's pretty cheap, so it's good quality too.
For painting, for me, Frederick's, obviously, I had a lot of I was using the Hobby Lobby brand canvases. Oh, I had problems with those, and they warped so bad. And I finally hit the point, I'm like, no more, I'm sticking to Frederick's. I know they work good. We'll just go with those and stay that way. So my favorite with them is either their blue label, the Frederick's Ultra Smooth Blue Label, which is for portraits and that sort of thing. It's so good for detail. And then the other would be any of their linen, whether it be oil or water-based primed. Their linen canvases are so wonderful to work on. I just love the effects that I get with those. And I like a lot of their canvases I'll use depending on what I'm doing. But definitely the smoother the better when I'm doing fine detail.
Okay, here's a question from Mikey. This is a good one. How do you know when a painting's finished? I don't know when to stop and often find myself trying to get a hyper-realistic effect when I'm really wanting a brush painterly finished piece. Also, can you both do a collaboration piece and then have a contest for us to win it? Both of you are awesome. So that's from Mikey. Do you want to go first on that one? So how do you know when it's finished?
When I'm sick of it. When I'm like, yeah, good enough. I'm not embarrassed to post this online. Done. That sounds like a funny thing, but I'm not. I don't know. Some people, I see people get so worked up about having everything perfect that they never finish anything. So that can definitely be a problem. But then you also have the other side where a lot of people just don't finish their work. Like if they worked on it another 3 hours, it would be amazing. It would take it from mediocre to amazing with that extra time. So I think it depends on, for me, what my goals are. I've got my reference photos for whatever it is that I'm working on, and when it looks enough like that reference photo, I'll call it done. When everything's blended nice, when there's no harsh, I'll put the canvas upside down and make sure that there's no hot spots that are standing out more than they should. But when everything seems fairly well balanced to me, that's when I call it done. But I have such a full-on plan of what I'm going to do to begin with that it's easy to judge when I'm done, because I'm not usually experimenting. I know what's going to happen before I start, so I think that makes it a little easier for me, and that just comes with practice.
Yeah, I'd say roughly the same. When I started off, the problem I had was I wanted to paint realistic, and then I got more and more realistic, and I thought that realism was really tied to detail, which as you progress with painting, I think you find it's more to do with color and tone, really, rather than the detail. You can have superb realistic paintings, and when you're looking perhaps 15 or 20 foot back, they look photorealistic, but when you get up to them, they're really painterly. When I was starting off, after the first couple of years, I was trying to put in too much detail to the point that I was virtually putting my nose to the canvas with a little tiny brush, just trying to get all those little hairs on there. Now, I still want it to be detailed, but I get up from the easel quite frequently and go back, probably 3, 4, 5 foot. And if I can't see the details that I've just put on, I don't see the point of putting any more on. So that's why I stop myself, because I've got that habit of doing too much as well. And if you want a painterly finish to your painting, stick with larger brushes. Put your small brushes away, and that will prevent you from fiddling and spoiling a painting usually if you just go to the smaller brushes all the time. So put your small brushes away, stay with the larger brushes, and as Lisa said, have a plan at the beginning and stick to your plan. And if you're wondering, have I actually finished now, just put it away. Leave it for a few days and then look at it with fresh eyes, and you may find you have finished, or you may want to put a little bit more detail in. That's about all I've got for that one.
Yeah, the big brush, that's such a good tip too. That makes such a difference when you're going for a painterly look.
Let's see. I've got another one. Well, it's almost linked in. Have you ever procrastinated doing art due to fear of failure? If so, how do you get past it? And that's from Diane Marie. And well, I can say as well, I've got another one from Adri, and he says, I get to the drawing and then it lies there accusing me for months or longer because I don't have the courage for fear of failure. Any advice? So do you want to go first on that one, Lisa? Or?
Yeah. That's a big thing. You have to get over that fear. And it kind of goes back to our first question of, I'm going to learn bad habits. I don't think that you will. It doesn't. If you do something and it looks terrible, who cares? That's part of the learning process. If you don't do it, you're never going to get better. You can sit around all you want and be afraid of not improving, or it's not going to look good, or this painting's going to be terrible. I just wasted a canvas. It's never wasted. It doesn't matter how good or how bad something comes out. You are not wasting your time if you're painting. I have some layers on my paintings where I'm just like, oh, that looks terrible. The previous layer looked way better. Paint over it. Keep painting. Keep working on it until it gets there. But if you don't get over that fear, you're never going to improve. You just have to kind of, I guess, bite the bullet. Why would someone bite a bullet? You have to just bite the bullet and do it. Just get to the easel and do it.
Yeah, I had this problem really bad when I first started off. Even to the point when I was starting off and I was doing the initial drawing on my canvas, I put so much detail in the drawing, I didn't want to paint over it. And then when I put the underlayer on, I'd spend so much time doing the underlayer. When that dried, I didn't want to paint over that. So it's really, well, I assume the word was anal. I just didn't want to spoil it. And that was because I was trying to make each painting perfect. I was putting too much effort into each painting. What I did to get around that was to stop myself being so precious with each stage of the painting. I started doing small canvases purely for experience, just to learn how to do different techniques and things like that. Now, I'd still spend quite a bit of time on there. I'd still spend a few hours. But what I would do, and this will seem crazy, but what I would do at the end, I'd rip them up, throw them in the bin. They were, yeah, they were specifically to learn from. They wasn't going to be sold. I didn't want to be so precious about my work all the time. They was going to be ripped up no matter how much time I put into it, and that's what I did for a few paintings. And then that stopped me worrying about it all the time, because it's just paint, canvas. They are virtually free. You know, I buy canvas on the roll. It just costs a few pence literally for a small canvas. I don't even buy it stretched. The paint is really cheap. The alkyds I buy really cheap. The most valuable thing is time. So if you've got the time, just go through the exercises as an exercise and don't try to make everything a finished perfect painting, because you will get that problem and you'll end up not painting anything at all. And to also stop yourself from stopping painting, try to make sure you finish everything as well, because if you get in the habit of not finishing a painting, that has a snowball effect, I found, and then you start to not finish loads of paintings. So make sure you finish them as well. So that's all I've got on that one.
A big one. The musician, the last band that I was in that I finally quit because of this, the musician, the main guy, he was one of the best musicians I played with. This guy was phenomenal, but he was such a perfectionist that nothing ever got done. We would write new music and we'd go to record it, and then he'd redo it and redo it and nothing got finished because of it. He has, as talented as he is, he has very little to show for it for his entire life's worth of music, because he's too picky and nothing's ever good enough. And honestly, I used to put our scratch tracks on my videos. People wanted to buy those. People liked the bad version, the rough version, and nothing was good enough. And it definitely has affected his musical musical career, because he just was too much of a perfectionist. So yeah, that's
Yeah, and I think some people as well, they get tied up with that, and then they just don't get past it. And they also start fiddling with a painting. They think it's finished, and then they keep working on it, and then a week later they work on it some more, and a week later they work on it some more. When you finish a painting, just leave it, done, move on.
A good thing you can do is just varnish it. Varnish it, and you can't mess with it really anymore after that. And that actually brings us that's a nice lead into our next question. I should find it so I can tell you who asked it, because it was a good one. Oh, well, it's not such a good a lead-in if I'm not ready for it, huh? Who asked this? Because I think I should credit them. And that is not the page I want.
Yeah, I've got a question on varnish as well, so that's probably may even be from the same
I'll bring up who it was while we're answering the question. But she was asking what type of varnish I use and what I varnish my paintings with. For me, for acrylic, I use a Krylon, something like that. It's just a spray varnish. I do a light coat of that first, and then when that dries after a few hours or a day, I put a coat of Liquitex gloss varnish on top of that. And the reason I have to do the spray first is if I've done a lot of glazing or airbrushing, or even if I haven't, I find that the Liquitex gloss varnish will sometimes lift or smudge color that was completely dry before. So by putting that spray varnish on first, just a light coat of that, and then the gloss varnish on top, I get a really nice finish. If I just use the spray varnish, I get hot spots where it's not completely even. So just light coat of that, and then the gloss varnish painted on with a sponge brush, and that is how I varnish my acrylic paintings. I'll let you talk about oils.
Well, the problem with oils, as you know, is that all the cans and all the manufacturers are going to say you've got to allow a painting to dry 6 to 12 months before you varnish it. Now, the problem with that, I don't know any really successful artists that want to allow the painting to stay in the studio for a year before they sell it. So I paint thin as well anyway, and you can varnish it quicker. And if you use alkyds, you can varnish it even quicker again. But the way I get around it is I use Winsor & Newton Artist Satin Varnish. I'm just reading it off the can. And it's a removable varnish. Now, that allows the painting to still breathe and dry underneath the varnish, but it still looks satin varnished. So that varnish can stay on there forever, or you can put a permanent version over it at 6 months or 12 months. But this gets me out of that predicament where I can actually sell a painting, ship it out within a week or so, and it is varnished and protected. So I use that Winsor & Newton satin removable varnish.
That I will have to look into. I normally, if it's a painting that I need to send to somebody right away, I put a coat of liquid, or the word just slipped my mind. Liquid.
We're going to say liquid?
Not a varnish. And they will tell you, do not use this as a varnish. And that's good advice. The reason that it ends up being a problem, twofold. One, it can yellow. It's not protecting as far as light fastness goes and archival qualities, but as long as the paints you're using are light fast, it's not really an issue. But the bigger issue is liquid dries very, very fast. If the paint underneath has it's very thick, well, even at all thick, if that liquid dries faster than the paint underneath that you painted, it can cause cracking and peeling and all kinds of a mess. So that's a big reason that they say do not use liquid as a varnish. For me, I paint in such light, thin layers that everything's 100% dry by the time I put a coat of liquid in. And the only reason I'm putting that coat of liquid is to give an even gloss. And then the customer can either, if they're local, they can bring the painting back to me in 6 months or a year and I'll varnish it with something heavier duty, or they can do it themselves or just not varnish. Honestly, I've not had an issue with painting that wasn't varnished either. But
yeah. Kerry also asked an almost exactly the same question, but she was asking about the problem with glazes with oil paint when you're using things like glazing medium and liquid, that the glaze section is shiny compared to the rest, and how do you even it out, and what varnish do you use? Well, I got this idea years ago. I saw a really top wildlife artist, and what he was doing in between each layer of paint, because he painted in layers, he was putting a very thin coat of liquid over the whole canvas, or the area he was going to paint, and then he'd paint into that almost wet and wet. Now his paintings were going for tens of thousands of dollars. I thought, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. His never seemed to have fallen apart.
yeah.
So what I do to even out that layer, if you don't want to use a satin varnish, I use a very thin coat of liquid or the M. Graham Walnut Alkyd Medium, which is very, very similar, and I apply that to the whole canvas as kind of a finishing varnish with a lint-free cloth like a t-shirt, so it is really super, super thin, and that's what I would use to even it out.
Yeah.
So it may not be correct as what the manufacturers and things like that are saying, and if your painting falls apart after a few years, don't blame me. But I saw this guy doing it, and his paintings were tens of thousands, so that's how he got around the problem as well.
I've been doing it this way and using liquid like this since around 2000, 2001, and
yeah.
I can say in that amount of time, none of my paintings have shown any negative anything. And I know that's only 15 years, but I've still not had an issue, and I know a lot of artists who do the same.
Yeah, same with me. Same with me.
So let's see. Next question. Helm Kyle asks, how can I blend areas like skies and make them smooth like oils? He's working in acrylics. I have a problem with the paints drying too fast. That goes back to get an airbrush. That's what we were talking about earlier. Get an airbrush, mist your canvas with water, and keep it wet while you're painting. That is the best way. That's the only way that I can get my really smooth clouds and skies like that. If you're only doing 2 colors, it's not as big of a deal, but when you start doing 3 or 4 or 5 colors in your sky, you have got to keep that paint wet, and that's where the airbrush, I think, really is. Even single action airbrush just for spraying, misting, and working wet into wet. So Aubrey Gale has a question for us asking, I keep saying has a question for us. Obviously they have a question for us. I need to stop repeating that. What is your favorite medium, and what is your least favorite, and your favorite thing about your, wait, no, sorry, I can't read. What is your favorite medium, and what is your least favorite and your favorite thing about your job?
The favorite medium is easy. For me, it's alkyd oils. I just like it because it seems to be a halfway house in between acrylics and oils. It's the best of both worlds. My least favorite medium, without a shadow of a doubt, is watercolor. I cannot get a hang on it whatsoever. It's by far the most difficult. I don't know why all beginners seem to start with it. It's really, really difficult. The best part about being an artist is that you're only answerable to yourself. The worst part is you're only answerable to yourself. So motivation can be a problem. If you can get yourself motivated, you can snowball it, and the secret is to keep it going, as Lisa has taught me. You got to just keep going and keep it going all the time. Otherwise, you'll stagnate, stop painting, stop working, stop eating eventually because you haven't got no money.
Yeah, it isn't. Oh, yeah, I know that. The starving artist thing, they have that for a reason. For me, my favorite medium depends on what I'm working on. Usually, if I'm working in acrylic, that is my favorite medium right now. If I'm working in oil, that's my favorite. But my top three would be oil, acrylic, and colored pencil. I don't think I could really choose between any one of those. And then graphite right behind that. I like to do all the things. Not watercolor. Terrible at watercolor, although I really want to try more with the Inktense pencils by Derwent. I played with those a little recently, and they were fun, and I made a horrible mess, but I still want to try them. For my favorite thing and least favorite thing about my job, my least favorite would be the negative YouTube comments. Oh my gosh, you would not believe what some people say to me. Just, they can be such jerks. And even though most of you guys are the most amazing people and say the coolest things to me and the most encouraging, you'll get that one where you're just like, really? Or, you talk too fast. Really? No kidding. No one has ever told me that before. I'm so glad you notified me that I talk too fast. But that starts to eat at me just all the time. My my favorite thing would be sharing my work with you guys and the positive feedback, and I love making videos, sharing that with you guys. I hate editing them though, but the actual making things that are going to help other people and teach other people, definitely a favorite for me. So that's, well, you do a couple questions now.
Okay, girl, this is a really quick one, really quick on my side anyway. Debbie asks, how do you tackle framing art for exhibitions? I can answer that. For me, really quickly, I don't do exhibitions. I don't get involved with framing. That's the end.
For me, I head over Hobby Lobby. I like because they have their frames go on sale half off all the time. Like every other week, they alternate between frames with glass versus open frames. So I usually go pick those up, and then I just have them install the frame, attach it right there for me. They charge like $1 to install it for the hanging things. I used to hang them myself or install the frame myself, and it was just a pain, and it's so much easier to pay $1 and let them do it for me. So that's how I go. I don't do custom framing because it is so expensive, and the buyer is probably going to want their own frame anyway, so I go as cheap as possible so it can be hung now, it looks good now, but that way if the buyer wants to replace it, it wasn't something I spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars on. I normally don't spend more than, I mean, even for my big canvases, maybe $30 or $40 for a frame. For my smaller things, I'm like $20 for a frame. So that's
yeah, I've had an experience with an exhibition that I did. I spent about $150 on a frame for one painting. The guy bought it. He said, how much will you knock off if you take it out of the frame? I said, well, I can't. It comes with the frame. And so he ended up buying it anyway, and he threw the frame in the bin. So
yeah,
it's crazy.
That is exactly why I won't spend a lot of money framing for stuff. I go cheap. I want it to look nice, but I'm also not going to go the most expensive frame that I can find either.
Yeah, it really suits deco and things like that as well. They buy it like that, so you can't really win on that one. But yeah, to go with the cheapest decent option, I suppose, really. And it goes through phases as well of the styles that people want. Sometimes they want just black, that goes through a phase, and then they want rustic, then it's gold. So you can never win with that.
Yeah.
You're just eating into profits all the time. I got a quick one from Laurie. And it's another quick one. When in a rush to get a painting done and you need a quick dry method, which way do you go to get there? For me, it's just alkyd oils. It's dry enough, actually, by the next morning. If I wanted to sell it and send it, I could. Obviously, you'd say just paint with acrylics.
Yep. Acrylics, or if I'm doing an oil painting, especially if it's something I need to get done fast, but I want the final layers to be oil, I just do oil over acrylic. And my base done in acrylics, I have everything done in a day that would take me a week in oils, letting it dry in between. Maybe not that long, but yeah, oil over acrylic for me, or just acrylic.
Do you use alkyds yourself then, Lisa, or you use
I just use regular Winsor & Newton oils, but the liquid makes it dry fast enough that by the next morning, I can start painting again.
Yeah, you should use the alkyds I use, because you haven't got to think about adding the liquid all the time. It's exactly the same.
Yeah, I may have to look into that. It's hard because these are easy for me to get, because when I go to my classes, I can just buy them there, and I've been using them for so long, but
Yeah, you get into the habit, don't you, of sticking with your medium then.
So I've got a question from Wynette. She did these elephants. I guess I need to do my screenshot again. 1 second while I figure this out. I'm having a slow moment again.
This is going to be a question about wrinkles then, I've no doubt.
No, actually it's not.
Oh, no.
So her question is, I did these elephants with Faber-Castell Polychromos pencils and the odorless paint thinner, but I am scared to do the background. What advice would you give, or should I always do the background first when I do a drawing like this? You know, this can go with oil, acrylic, colored pencil, whatever. I like to do my background first. It just makes it easier for me to judge my values. In this case, with these elephants, I would probably just leave the paper white. I like the look with the white background like this. But your elephants don't have a ton of contrast, so if you do your background, it's depending on what colors you do, they could easily get lost in that background. So that's something you would have to end up going back into the elephants and do touch-ups and adjustments on them to make them mesh well with the background. So personally, I always do my background first, but that's just what works for me. I've seen amazing artists who always do the background last. So you've got to figure out what is going to work best for you.
Yeah, funnily enough, we had this conversation a couple of weeks back, Lisa, didn't we? Where I said to you, why are a lot of top artists leaving the background till last? What's the benefit? I couldn't see any benefit really in it myself, because I almost always put the background in first so that I can layer the edges over it to stop that cutout appearance.
That's a big thing there.
But now I kind of put the background in last because I've changed my mind. The benefit for putting the background in last, the only benefit I can really see with paint anyway, is that you can more easily judge the tone that you want the background to be. So if you really want that subject to pop out and you've got the darkest darks already in on your subject, say it's an elephant, you know then you can judge much more easily how light you want the background to be if you're doing atmospheric effects and things like that. So that's why I think lots of artists, wildlife artists, put the background in not necessarily last, but they do it as a mid-stage. So they put that background in, and then they put the details on the foreground animal, and they layer it over the top. So that's what I think there.
I design everything in Photoshop first, so I already know what my background's going to look like. So that may be part of why it's easier for me. I already know which background I've chosen and what colors are going to be best.
Yeah.
So let's see. Next I have, we answered that one. Louise Gray has 2 questions. Are there any charts you can use for mixing portrait colors? She tends to make hers too orangey, and she's not sure how to tone that down. I've got an easy answer for that one. And she said she's also having problems incorporating yellow into her skies of blue with acrylics. First, for the color in mixing portraits, if you're too orange, whenever you have a color, if I'm too red, I'm going to add its complementary color. I'm going to add some green to it. If I'm too orange, add some blue. That will usually tone it down, so that's really helpful there. As far as a color chart, it's going to vary so much depending on what you're doing. I mean, your light source, you can put me in 5 different light sources, and I'm going to need 5 different sets of colored pencils or acrylic paint to get the right skin tone. So there's too many variants in there. I know a lot of people like to say, always use these colors, these 5 colors for every portrait. It depends. Everyone's skin tone is different. The lighting is going to be different. And so as far as finding a color chart, I don't find that helps too much. I did have a video showing you guys how, and I will put a link when this gets uploaded to YouTube. Actually, let me find that. Matching color. Anyway, there's a video that I did showing you how I use Photoshop to choose more easily judge what skin tones or what colors you need for a portrait that you're working on, but there's too many variances in there, so I haven't seen a good chart where I would say this is the one that you need to get. For acrylics, mixing yellow, blues, your yellows and blues both in your skies, you want to mix purple in between, or mix another color in between. You could use magenta, you could use any other color, but if you go straight yellow to blue, you have a tendency to come up with green. This is easy to avoid if you're working in oils because they dry fast. But if you're working in acrylics, you have to blend very quickly. Even if I'm using an airbrush to keep it wet, I'm going to take a bit of yellow or a bit of purple, even if I just mix some purple in with my yellow to get a brownish, more neutral tone before I hit the yellow. So yellow and blue are actually touching. There's an in-between color of something else, and that will help me avoid getting green.
Yeah, that's it, using a buffer layer to stop that green when you blend in. for any subject, I think if you're having trouble actually seeing what the color is, you can always use an image editing software and select the color picker or something like that to actually choose it, or cut a hole in a piece of paper so you can really differentiate that color from other colors, and that makes it easier to see. But as you said, Lisa, adding the complementary color always grays it down. And I was teaching a guy the other day, and you can't give formulas when you're actually doing colors. It doesn't work like that. So what I always do, I draw on the side of my easel. I've got a really big drawing easel, you can see it behind me, and I put a piece of paper on the side. I'll draw red, yellow and blue on it. I'll put orange, purple and green on there, and then whoever's learning can look at that, and if something is too red, they look at the opposite and it's green. If it's too yellow, they look at the opposite and it's purple. They know what to add to grey a colour down. And it's the greying of the colour that's more important, really, than mixing it. You know, you've got to know, especially with wildlife art, you've really got to know how to grey a colour, or everything's going to look super vibrant and nothing's ever going to look real. So I am actually doing a video now mixing colour as well, showing the simple, really simple red, yellow and blue, and the thought process behind mixing colour. I think once you create or you've got a handle of the thought process of mixing colour, things start to come much more easily then, whether it's a portrait, an apple, a wildlife, whatever.
Yeah. I've got a question that's actually going to be good for you too. Pamela Rudy asks, she has two parts to her question. She wants to know, what do you love about painting wildlife? What do you find challenging? And what would you like to paint more of? Her technical question, the second part, is that she'd like to start painting using pastels and pencils mostly at the moment. I did not read that right. She would like to start painting. She is currently using pastels and pencils. She said she has to work in short sessions in her living room, so she's looking for something non-toxic and fairly forgiving to stop and start. So acrylics, oils, gouache, water mixable oils, slowing the dry time of acrylics versus the dry time of oils. So we've already covered a lot of that part of the question. Using the airbrush will help. Water mixable oils, I just want to throw this out there. I hate them. I think they're from the devil. They're just horrible. Yeah. They don't work the same. It's not the same medium as oil paint. If you want to work in oils, work in oils. But yes, they are toxic, so that is a thing. But with acrylics, spraying water will keep it okay. As far as Joseph has asked where people are asking these questions, I'm pulling the ones off the Facebook post that I made and some emails that people have sent. And I think, Jason, you're pulling yours off Facebook as well, aren't you?
Yeah, just Facebook, yeah. There was enough on there.
Yeah.
The thing to note when you're painting oils, if you're doing it in a living room, even if you're using odorless thinners, it's generally toxic. So even though you can't smell it at all, sometimes you still need ventilation in there, a big room, a window open and things like that. So don't be fooled by that. If I was going to be in a really small space, to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't even look at oils. I would probably just teach myself acrylics, just for the safety aspect of it.
Acrylics, once you get the hang of them, acrylics can look just like oil. For me, if someone can look at one of my acrylic paintings and say that was acrylic or this one was oil, then I feel like I failed. They should look the same. When they're done in varnish, usually the varnish is what makes the acrylics. It pulls the colors and makes it more bold so it looks more like an oil painting. But you can make acrylics look like oil. It's harder to learn. The cool thing, though, if you learn acrylics first like I did, when you switch over to oils, you're going to feel like you're cheating. It is so much easier. So there's value in learning both. The first part of her question was asking, what do we love about painting wildlife? What do we find challenging? And what would we like to paint more of?
The thing I love about painting, well, I don't know what it is I love about painting wildlife. Sometimes you just get drawn to a subject, whether that's portraits, wildlife, whatever that may be. I've always been interested in animals and wildlife. I've always sketched and drawn, and then I just started painting, so it was obvious that was going to join together and link in, really. So I think it's just what you're drawn to. The hardest part of wildlife is getting fur to look realistic, so that everything doesn't look hard-edged and rigid. But because that's so challenging, that's also the beauty of it as well. And there's so many different subjects. Wildlife can be insects, fish, you know, anything whatsoever. What would I like to paint a lot of? I like to paint elephants, but you know, everything. I hope to be doing this for many years, so I hope to paint as many different subjects as I can, to be honest.
That's kind of me. I want to paint all the things. Well, obviously, you guys have seen I range from wildlife to portraits and surrealism. I love all of the different things. My favorite thing about wildlife, I just think wildlife is beautiful. There's just something about that. In all the details, creating something that looks super realistic, I end up with such a high from that that's what I like so much about it. For things that are challenging, elephants. I'm going to go with elephants. Those wrinkles are a lot of work.
Well, you should check out my video because I've simplified that. It's not as hard as it looks.
I did a kind of cheating way where I was just kind of almost cross-hatching to get the wrinkles, but it still wasn't. I mean, if you look close, you're like, yeah, that's not that realistic. But if you guys want to ask questions right now that are watching in the little page, I can refresh that and pull some of those up since we don't have the questions enabled. So if anyone does want to ask...
Can I do a quick question, Lisa, for you? Because I know you like copyright issues. You like to study that. And this is a good one. It's from Donna Barker, and she says, "Hello, Lisa, Jason. I have one of those dreaded copyright questions. I love watching those wildlife documentaries about big cats. If I was to pose a moving picture, and you know where I'm going with this now, and use the image for my painting, would I be able to sell it? In theory, the still picture is not a photograph. Thanks." I got my opinion, but you've looked into this more. What do you think?
Belongs to whoever made the video. The image, the entire video is copyrighted to them. However, realistically, they're not going. If you're taking an actor or an actress, yeah, people are going to be like, "That's that person from that video or that movie, and you copied it, and copyright violation. Here's your lawsuit." But for unless you're doing fan art, and then that's a whole other thing. But for wildlife, if you're not copying it exactly, like if I'm painting a lion, there was one I did not long ago. I had a good decent reference photo, but I wasn't seeing, there was a certain atmosphere I was missing, so I went to those wildlife documentaries and paused it to see how the light was hitting certain areas, how, you can definitely get some from it. As long as you're not copying it exactly, you don't have to worry about it at all. Realistically, most people probably... on those documentaries, if you copy the background the same, yeah. If you're changing everything, every cat moves the same way. Every dog walks the same way. So if you're just getting a pose, no problem. I wouldn't worry about that. If you're copying the lighting and the background and the leaves and everything's exactly the same, yeah, then you could run into bigger issues. But if you're just using it as reference and not copying it exactly, then there are really no problems.
Yeah, I think what Donna may not have seen clearly is that she's thinking that a frame, perhaps a single frame from the video, would not be copyrighted. But if the video is copyrighted, and virtually every one of them are, each frame is obviously copyrighted too. We're not lawyers, so it's just our ideas and things like that. But if you're going to use video references, take images out of there, if you're going to take an image that's something like two tigers fighting out in the wild, they may be up on both back legs, it may be a golden sunset behind, and it may be one of those video once in a lifetime moments. If you're going to freeze that frame and paint that and you get found out, they're going to definitely know that that came off that particular video by that particular cameraman, so you're probably going to get into trouble with that. But you can't copyright an idea and things, those type of things. So if you were seeing a nice light effect in a video, or you're seeing a position of the animal and you're just using that, I should imagine that's fine. And I've seen lots and lots and lots of wildlife artists use documentaries for their study and for their paintings, but I'm pretty sure, especially the big names, they're only using it for things like body position, angles, atmospheric effects, and things like that. They're not going to be copying all that as far as copying a complete photograph.
Oh, look, a question popped up. I don't know how that happened, but we have a question asking, oh, it went away. Where did you go? Oh, here we go, in the chat. Monique just asked, how do we handle shipping off commissions, and how do you package them, especially your colored pencil drawings? Yay for questions. Thanks, Monique. I don't like to give advice on shipping, and this is why. if you screw it up or something gets messed up, I don't want you coming back to me and going, your method did not work for me and it got damaged. I don't want to give bad advice to people. I do two ways. I will tell you this. When I ship, if it's within the U.S., I pack it within cardboard and lots of, because everything in colored pencil would be matted. And this would really be done the same with paintings. I mat everything, or not mat, cover everything in cardboard, and then put it in a custom box that I make myself. I just cut it down with a box cutter and tape it up. There's a lot of tape. I am so tape happy. But I use tons and tons of tape and make my own box. UPS will not guarantee a box that you packaged yourself. That's an issue because in the U.S., that's who I'm using to ship. And even though I paid insurance, all the insurance is covering is if it gets lost. If they damage it, if they stab it with a knife, doesn't matter. They didn't box it. They're not covering it. And that irritates me. So I'm paying insurance to ensure that you deliver it, which is what I paid for in the first place. So I'm basically paying you twice to do your job. Anyway, side rant there. Irritating. But for like when I shipped something, I recently shipped, if you guys remember the little girl, the girl Ashley that I did with the red hair in colored pencil, that one, her mom ended up purchasing that. And so that had to go to the UK. I can't ship big flat boxes like that. It would cost like $400 to get that over to the UK. So I got a tube. I rolled it very loosely. I wanted it to be a wide enough, stick in my hands. It was like this wide. I rolled the colored pencil portrait into that. It was not matted because I can't mat it. It would have to be flat. I rolled it into that tube and sent it that way, and that tube was thick, and I knew that drawing was not going to get damaged. So if the customer is okay with you rolling things and shipping it into the tube, I think the tubes are one of the best, safest ways. But if you're shipping a stretched canvas or something that's matted like mine that needs to be flat, I wrap it in tons of cardboard, like 2 inches thick of cardboard. Anyone who's gotten anything from me probably thinks that I have a weird tape addiction. But that's how I do it. You can talk to the UPS. Safest bet is let them pack it for you. But it's like $40 additional on top of shipping to do that. So you have to decide what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, for us in the UK, and well, with you really, if you're shipping internationally, if it's something large, almost your only option is tube. That's the safest option. Shipping flat, stretch canvases can be a real problem. It also depends on how much you're selling your paintings for. If you're a real top artist and you're selling them for thousands, you're going to be crating it and having special crates made, and the price is going to be in with whatever your client is actually paying. But personally, I ship everything in a tube. I usually ship with Royal Mail, A-Mail, International Sign for or Issuer, so that's all a bit more expensive, but it's still quite reasonable. You can insure that then for whatever you want. Now the problem is, from what I found out, you insure it for whatever you want. So if your customer's just paid $500 for a painting, you think you'll insure it for $500. If it gets lost, obviously the shipping company is going to pay $500. But from what I've learned over the years, they won't. You've paid $500 insurance, they'll pay you back the cost of the materials that created the painting. So that's probably going to be about $5 or $10. Even though every week I was sending paintings off and they were happily taking my insurance, knowing it was paintings inside of it, I later found out when I phoned their head office that it's not actually insured. So unless you've got, I forget what the name of it is, but an actual record showing what your paintings have been valued at by independent valuers over the years, and you've got a history of selling at a certain rate and things like that, forget about it. You might as well just go with the standard insurance. And I know artists that send out paintings that are actually a couple of $1,000s, and they just take the chance every time because there's nothing else you can actually do.
Even if you're paying the insurance, like you said, they'll come back and go, oh, you didn't pack it right, or like it's only worth the cost of supply. Yeah, that ends up being a real problem.
Yep, no matter what. So to get around it, I just send in tubes and that's it.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
And the
really.
tubes, the one that I shipped, the tube was way cheaper than buying a box, and it was so well protected. There was no way someone was going to damage this tube.
Yeah, unless they stand on it deliberately, it should be safe. And if they're going to damage it in some way by putting a crate on top, no matter what you do, it's going to be damaged anyway. But fingers crossed, touch wood, I haven't had any problems so far.
Yeah. We've got Evelyn asks, what is your biggest blooper ever when painting or recording a video?
we edit those out.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. I did leave one in once, and somebody pointed it out. It was from my voiceover tutorial. At one point, I redid something, and I said something about, no, that's not right, and I meant to delete that section, and I left it in, and it went live. At that point, it's live. I'd lose the views if I that video I'd already had if I fixed it, and I panicked. I was like, oh, tell me I didn't swear. Tell me it wasn't a swear word that I meant to edit out. So that was kind of a bit of a panic moment for me, but it was okay. There were no swear words.
Yeah, you know what it's like when you're editing. It's frustrating. Sometimes you spend more time editing than actually doing the painting sometimes.
Oh, absolutely.
And I've said a few choice words before now, and I haven't noticed it, but I always watch my videos back and check them all out, and I did catch it, and I had to redo it completely because that wouldn't have gone down well on YouTube.
Yeah, I don't watch mine. Well, the Patreon ones, the 1 and 2 hour long ones, I don't watch those. So whatever that happens, that's what happens. And now the ones that go up on YouTube, though, I am making a habit of.
Yeah.
Like the regular public ones, I am being more careful and making sure that I watch those. Whoops. So the other thing, the main thing that I edit out would be me yelling at my dogs to lay down.
Yeah.
I'm going to kill you. Lay down, because every time I start recording, she then thinks she's thirsty and needs water. And that dog, oh my gosh, when she thinks she needs water, she is not giving up until she gets her drink of water. It doesn't matter if she just had it 5 minutes ago. I start recording, she needs water. Every freaking week. This is like, so yeah, I have to edit out a lot of me swearing at the dog that, threatening her life. And she's just like, yeah, right, I know you're not going to touch me. But yeah, those are my big ones.
Have you got any more?
I've got tons more. How about you?
I've got a few more. We're probably going to have to do another hangout at some point.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we're getting there. Following up with the other one, Tim White asked if my assistants have names. They do. They are Jessie, the blue one, and Echo is my black one. That was a quick question.
Yeah. I've got a question from Taylor. Do you ever have days or weeks when you don't want to draw or paint? I do. I feel I just need to detox myself from a previous project before starting something new. If you do you force yourself to go to the studio or do you take the break? Well, when I painted my latest snake painting, I definitely needed a break from snakes. Those scales drove me bloody wild. But usually, I think if you change the subject, I'm ready to start painting straight away. Again, I'm always really keen. The problem I find is, and Lisa, you probably find the same, sometimes it's difficult to get the time to paint rather than get the inspiration or the desire to paint. I actually struggle getting the time to paint. It was only, to be honest, I taught a lesson day before yesterday. That was the first time I picked up a brush in months.
Wow.
Literally months. Now, it's not through choice. That was just all the other business side of it. I just didn't have time. I couldn't fit it in whatsoever. But the flip side of that is, and what I'm trying to do now, just do a little bit of painting every day if at all possible. Make it as easy for yourself as possible to just pick up the brushes. So if you've got an area in the kitchen or something like that, try and have just a small area with all the equipment is there ready to pick up really quick. So you can just do 15 minutes. And that's what I'm trying to do now, because you find if you just set yourself 15 minutes, you usually end up painting for an hour or two. And painting, as Lisa will say, painting is what actually improves you more than anything else. Actually doing the painting. It's all right reading about it and talking about it and watching YouTube videos, which we appreciate, but you actually got to pick the brush up, stick it in some paint, and actually apply it to the canvas. That's how it works. So I think within reason, you need to force yourself if you really want to improve.
Yeah, it changed so much for me with YouTube, because when I signed on with the network, they were like, you should do a video every week, try to do one every week. And at this point, I was only doing speed paintings. And I'm like, how am I going to get a new painting done every week? How is that even possible?
Yeah.
Turns out if you stop playing World of Warcraft, you have time to do a whole lot of other stuff. But for me, I used to take a break. After the holidays, when I always had tons of orders and tons of things to get done, I was always totally burnt out from painting, didn't want to do it anymore. Now, I don't have time for that. I have to have something new finished every single week. And so what I do is mix up the medium. If I'm sick of colored pencil after I finish something, I switch to oils or I switch to acrylic. And because I'm switching back and forth, that makes it a little easier not to feel burnt out from it. But I don't have time not to work. So when I finish one thing, it's not even something I can consider anymore. Okay, I'm going to take a break for a week or two. Like I would fall behind on YouTube, and my own personal, like, I have to get this done every week won't let me. So I jump from one thing right into the next. I actually usually have a list of projects that I plan to do.
But I tell you, you know, if you actually want to take a layoff, I've deliberately taken a layoff. When I painted a really large elephant painting, that did actually burn me out a little bit. But I found that even when I'm not painting, I'm thinking about things and thinking about how I would tackle things. Once you've started art, you're never the same again. You look at clouds and colors and everything completely differently. And I find sometimes, even if I've stayed away from painting for a week or two or a month or two, I don't know about you, Lisa, because I know you definitely suggest keep painting and things like that, practice. But I think when you get to a certain standard, I've had a month or two off, gone back to painting, I've actually felt that I've improved by not painting. I don't know why, but I think it's just because, similar to an athlete, sometimes when they're injured, they can actually subliminally or actually think about doing the movement of, say, a javelin throw, and they got that on their mind, and it's almost the same, and you're using muscle memory, and we do that with painting as well, I think. So I wouldn't worry about a layoff. If you want to do a layoff, you're not going to revert back to where you was, say, 6 months or a year ago just because you took a month off. So I don't know what your experience is with that.
Yeah, it's kind of actually, they're on the other side, which I don't think really applies to art. It just made me think of this. With musicians, they'll say if you've taken a break from playing and you start playing again, you suddenly feel like you're better. And the reality for musicians is, because you do lose it. You have to practice regularly. I know I haven't done it lately, and I'm trying to record a song right now, and it is not going well. But for us, what was happening is when you get to where you're doing it all the time, you start getting super picky. So you feel like you're not as good, but really it's just that you're being super, super picky because you are better. And then when you stop playing for a while, your picky side kind of lays off a bit. So I know musicians will say they feel better after a break, but when they listen to the recordings of before and after the break, they're like, oh, that really wasn't as good. So it's kind of funny. But art, I think you're right. I think with art, it is different. It's because you are always thinking about it. So do you want to get one more question in, and then we'll save these questions for next time?
Okay, really quick one. It's for you, actually, Lisa. It's from, wow, I can't understand that name, Babija or something like that. She says, or he says, for getting a transparent glaze on a portion of an acrylic painting, now is it Pebble or Peebo matte gel be used? Any other suggestions for getting transparency with acrylic paints? So I've got no idea of that.
You've got a couple options. One is to use water. That's what I use. More often than not, I use water when I'm glazing. Now, the thing that you have to keep in mind with acrylics, when you're glazing with water, the more water you add, the more transparent it is. But the less adhesive that paint is. So if you thin it down too much, when you put your next layer off, that previously too thin layer can lift. That's not normally a problem. It's just something that you need to be aware of. And once you varnish your painting, it's set. It's not going to peel off or flake. Like there's a really bad YouTube out there right now where this woman's telling people how if you mix water, it'll flake and peel and chip. And no, once it's varnished, it's fine. But the other option is to go with a mixing medium. I have one over there somewhere that's too far away and I can't see it, but I do have one that I use. It's by Liquitex, and it is a glazing medium. You can get them that are matte finish or satin or gloss, however you want, and those are kind of nice to work with too. I don't like to use gloss in my paintings while I work, if I can avoid it. That is one thing that I really like with acrylic paintings, because I can avoid the gloss. That means they're going to photograph better for prints later. I can put the gloss on after once I've got the photograph. For oils, it's always a challenge because you've got that glare, and trying to get photos for prints is a pain. So with acrylics, I don't like to use a gloss varnish at all. I don't want anything glossy on my painting. I use the Liquitex Basics because they're a very flat finish, which means they photograph well. And then I just add the gloss varnish on after, so I get that shiny oil painting look when I'm finished. But yeah, the water, I'd say 95% of the time, if not more than that, I stick with water when I'm glazing. There is rarely an exception to that for me.
I'm smiling because Tea Leaf posted dogs in the background just staring at her. Lol. And that, it is true.
Yeah, she's been back there for a while.
That's a good guard dog.
Yeah, great guard dog.
That's about it for me anyway. There are a few more questions, some more in-depth ones that we'll have to do on another hangout, I think.
Yeah, we definitely will need to do this again, and hopefully we'll know how to have the Q&A part enabled. I will get Joseph's help on that one. Maybe try to talk him into being in the call so he can help us.
Yeah. We could do it without help. It's difficult.
Yeah.
Hopefully people found it of use anyway.
Yeah, so thanks for watching, guys.